The Washington Post over the weekend had a long story suggesting that people who used to work for this administration were suggesting that regulations were held back last year because it was an election year. How do you react to that?
OMB works as expeditiously as possible to review rules, but when it comes to complex rules with significant potential impact, we take the time needed to get them right. The administration is committed to a regulatory strategy that maintains a balance between protecting the health, welfare, and safety of Americans and promoting economic growth, job creation, competitiveness, and innovation. Our goal is not to move rules hastily, but to maximize the effectiveness and benefits of the rules we complete.
Jay Carney at the White House with an answer to a pretty detailed Washington Post story over the weekend about regulations being held back on not only health care, but the EPA and others because of the election year. We're back with our panel. Kirsten, what about this?
Well, the story alleged that there were 7 current and former employees who are making this claim. So this is not based off of one person. The way and the fact that Jay Carney really didn't address that, he just read a prepared statement. You know, if the Washington Post story is correct, it's yet another problem with Obamacare, and this is particularly corrupt. And I think that they're going to have to give a better answer than that sort of prepared nonsense.
And frankly, Katie, some of the people testifying up on the Hill on the website side basically said the reason that they couldn't roll it out effectively is because the regulations didn't come out until later.
Right, and the White House is saying that this was purely coincidental, that these regulations weren't pushed through until after the election, and we've heard that line before, whether it's with the website or anything else. And the problem here is that, again, you know, with the election, of course, they didn't want to give Mitt Romney any more ammo on the regulation part as they needed to, because he, of course, was running on this idea that the Obama administration has been over-regulating and stifling business. But this, again, shows that they're being a little bit dishonest when it comes to why these regulations were pushed back, to constantly be saying that it's coincidental that all of these things happened right after the election. You maybe can use that once or twice, but it's not going to add up when you continue to use it for everything that comes out after the election.
Charles?
Translation of that word salad that we heard from Jay Carney. You got me, what can I say? I mean, this is obvious that when you have 7 people who say explicitly that this had to do with the election, the administration was manipulating the process. But it isn't only in regulation. Look at how it used the election day as a fulcrum for all of its actions in 2012. You had the debt ceiling fight of a year earlier, where Obama said, I'll only go for a long-term one. And by an incredible coincidence, a long-term meant that the debt ceiling would hold until after Election Day in 2012. You also had this strange decision by Obama to conclude the fighting in Afghanistan in that year before Election Day, in the middle of the fighting season, where everybody understood the logical thing to do is either before or after, which would end up in the winter. And you also had the arguments about the Benghazi investigation. Another amazing coincidence, the internal report was released after Election Day. This administration that was purely political, and the worst element of it was Obama campaigning and saying repeatedly against the Republicans in 2012, these guys, the Republicans, the GOP, care only about the next election and not about the next generation, at a time when his administration was manipulating the regulations in Obamacare in a way that actually hurt the rollout of Obamacare. Condign punishment, I would say.
Kirsten, what about this this field hearing that Republican Chairman Darrell Issa held about the navigators, their weak background checks, and possibly also exposing personal information?
Well, first I would say I think that Darrell Issa should just stick to the problem, which is Obamacare, where you've got pretty much the whole country on your side, and stop going back to ACORN and these other things. That's just a tactical issue. But look, it just seems that every aspect of Obamacare, there just seems to be rifled with incompetence. You know, it's just, there doesn't seem to be anything that's been done correctly. And I think the idea that, are we even surprised, I guess is the question. Are we surprised that the navigators don't have good background checks? It's just, it seems that every component of this has not been done correctly, and the administration needs to account for that. They need to explain why this happened, how this happened, and some people need to be held accountable for it.
The White House says it's one more data point in the Republican obsession with sabotaging Obamacare.
I would say that when you have the Health and Human Services Secretary under President Obama saying under oath in front of Congress that some of these navigators could be convicted felons, that's something that should be taken seriously, and we should talk about that. In addition to that, we've seen undercover video showing that navigators were encouraging people to lie on their application forms so they could get a bigger subsidy. So there is evidence to show that these navigators maybe shouldn't be trusted and that your personal information shouldn't be given to complete strangers who aren't going through background checks.
That is it for the panel, but